I wish you luck in realizing your ambition.
Hey everyone, it's BlueLizardJello and welcome back to Everything Possible in Elden Ring. We are here at the Church of Ella, and last time, well, this is as far as we got. We did enter the lands between, we did a little bit of hunting, some resource gathering, we talked about smithing, we talked to Calais, we did a little bit of a loop. Back there we found the statue of Roses, the Usher of Death, a little pond with some land squirts in it. Can't ever say that with a straight face, but here we are. And we can finally start to tackle some very real enemies. But before we do that, as always, I'm going to take a look at my status. Here are my stats. If you want to know any more, just pause the video now. As for gear, well, it's the exact same as we've started with. The longsword, halberd, the heater shield, the vagabond knight set, minus the helm, because good golly, I'm just too pretty. I have my flask of crimson tears in my hotbar, and I have my flask of cerulean tears in my pouch, at least for now. But today we're going to be talking about a couple different mechanics right up front, so we can then get into some more gameplay and hopefully make a few more advances than we did last time. The first is I want to take a moment to look at equipment, and specifically look at weapons and our shield, their stats and their attribute scaling, and exactly what that means. So if I go into my menu, go to my equipment, here's my longsword, here's the halberd, here's the heater shield. Let's take a look at each one individually. So I'm going to actually click on the longsword, and you can see here right in the center we have all the information regarding the longsword. We do have a little bit more explanation in the game if we, well, at least on the DualSense, hit the touchpad and then look at the explanation. We can find out what kind of category it is, the type of damage that's dealt, so this deals standard or pierce damage depending on the move. And the name of the skill is listed here, square off. The amount of FP that it takes, which by the way, you notice how it's in parentheses there. You have a 6 and an 8. If you remember, square off has a light attack follow-up and a heavy attack follow-up when you're in the square off stance. If you do a light attack, it takes 6 FP. If you do a heavy attack, it takes 8. There's the weight of the equipment, and now we start getting into the attack power. Now the weapons that we have currently all deal 100% physical damage. You can see that all of these other attributes, these elements down here, are 0. So the longsword deals a base damage of 110, but then to the right of it you have this plus 15. Now that number to the right isn't always a positive number, it can be a negative number if you do not meet the stat requirements in order to wield that weapon or that armament properly. In this case, not only do we have the stats, but we actually have a little bit above and beyond, and that is where that second number is coming from. That plus 15 is actually coming from our attribute scaling. Attribute scaling means that your certain stats, your strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and arcane, can increase a weapon's damage, whether it is physical, magic, fire, lightning, holy, as well as certain other status effects like bleed, like sleep buildup. Depending on what stats you're choosing to level, it can greatly increase the damage that you are dishing out. For example, our longsword has a D in strength and a D in dexterity. Now it is a letter system, which is a very imperfect system. It starts at S being the highest tier, and then A, B, C, D, and so forth. However, the letters themselves actually are a bit of a sliding scale, so a D in strength scaling on a longsword may not mean the same as a D scaling in, let's say, a colossal sword, or a colossal hammer, or even a mace for that matter. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, and more so compare it to other weapons, and it'll show you a blue if it's better than, white if it's the same as, or red if it is worse than something else you're trying to compare it to. Okay, so that is our attribute scaling. Of course, we have the attributes required. Same thing, strength, dex, intelligence, faith, and arcane. The longsword has a strength requirement of 10 and a dexterity of 10 as well. Up in the top right, you can see I have a strength of 14 and a dexterity of 13 for that matter. So, because I am above the base, I am actually getting a bonus. So I'm dealing 110 base plus 15 due to that attribute scaling. It's not just weapons, however, that have attribute scaling. We're going to see with an item we're going to pick up here soon, and actually an item we can craft here in just a moment, that the attribute scaling is on your consumables, your throwables as well, which actually can scale very, very nicely. We can also take a look at the halberd. Same thing, you can see here in red, that means it is a worse characteristic than the one that I was just comparing it to. So I'm comparing this to the longsword since I'm now on the longsword slot. So if we take a look at the explanation, we have a halberd category. It is a halberd after all. Standard and pierce damage. Charge forth is the skill. The FP cost is 16. So 16 whether you just tap the skill or you charge it, it is the same amount. So that is more than the square off skill. The weight is 8. That is much higher than the longsword, hence why it is in red. And then we also have some attack power. 125 being the base. I'm getting an extra 20 because of the attribute scaling. And notice, even though the strength and dexterity are both Ds, just like the longsword, because they are blue, it tells us that it is higher on the D scale, if you will, than the longsword. So every point in strength and every point in dexterity will scale the halberd better or more than the longsword. You also have guard damage or guarded damage negation. These are percentages that will reduce an enemy's attack if you are using it to block, which of course you can only do if you're two-handing that weapon. We're going to see that here in a little bit when we start talking about guard counters again. Okay, so we also have guard boost. Now guard boost, this is something that's really important for shields because there's two, other than the damage negation, there's two other factors that determine a shield's effectiveness in guarding. The guard boost and the type of shield it is, whether it's a small, medium, large, or great. The guard boost is the reduction to your stamina. It says right here, the stability of character's defense, the higher this value, the smaller the amount of stamina consumed when guarding attacks. The higher this value, the less your stamina gets depleted when enemies are hitting your shield. The other thing, and when we take a look at the shield, it's pretty much the same type explanation, but as we go over here and we look at the guard boost, it's 49, much higher than that of the halberd, but notice up here, it is a medium shield. So medium shield means that your standard attack is actually going to recoil off of this shield and leave the enemy open. Heavy attacks, jump attacks, power attacks, skill attacks, however, are not necessarily going to recoil. You won't take the same amount of damage because that's going to be determined by your damage negation. However, the enemy may not recoil, meaning you won't interrupt a combo, for example, leaving you a nice opportunity. So the bigger the shield, the more attacks can bounce off of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that a bigger shield means you'll take less damage, because you can see here, this heater shield being a medium shield weighing only 3.5, 100% of physical damage will be completely negated provided we have the stamina to withstand the attack. But certain great shields, even like wooden great shields, more attacks are going to recoil off the shield, but being that it is less than 100% physical damage negation, will take what we call chip damage through that shield. So a few things to consider there, but I wanted to talk about these stats because as we go through this game, we're going to talk a little bit more about them in passing, so I'd like to get this explanation kind of out front. Right, I had mentioned crafting. Let's do a tiny bit of crafting, and I have a couple of notes that I bought from Kale last time, and I completely forgot to read them, so we'll do that here in a moment. But let's take a look at the crafting. We've already looked at all the different items that we can craft, but I'd like to actually craft some of these bone darts. The bone darts, these can be, well, used to deal damage. It's not very much. However, let's make 2 sets of them, so that'll be 10 total. And then, oh, I meant to actually put them on my hotbar. Let's put them right here. So I'm going to put on both the bone darts and the ruined fragments so we can kind of compare and contrast. So even though this is a material used for crafting items, it does have attribute scaling, A in strength, C in dexterity, bone darts, a B in strength, A in dexterity. These are both typically used just to draw enemies aggro in, pulling an enemy away from a group or a pack to make it easier to fight them one-on-one. The ruined fragment is going to drop off significantly. The bone dart flies a lot further and a lot straighter. We're going to pick up some more throwing items here very soon that have really good attribute scaling and an added bonus of bleed buildup. We'll pick that up here though in just a moment. Right, so the next thing we're going to talk about, and even though we talked about it at the end of the last episode, we're going to talk about guard counters. Guard counters are an incredible tool in Elden Ring that allows you to hold your shield up or hold up an armament in the block position, such as two-handing my longsword and then holding L1 to block. And when an enemy hits me, even if I take damage, even if I don't actually cause them to recoil, I can then follow it up with a heavy attack right away and I'll get a guard counter. dealing lots of physical damage, but also dealing lots of stagger or stance damage, potentially opening them up for a critical. So I want to play around a little bit with that. We did it last time against those bats, and that was just not only poor gameplay, apologies for that, but that is not a very good enemy to practice on anyway. But up here we do have some really good enemies to practice on, the Godric soldiers. This is a really good run from here over to the next site of grace that's over that hill, or up to the cave up there. This is a great opportunity to practice some of your advanced combat techniques, your skills, your guard counters, your parries, backstabs, etc. And that's exactly what we're going to do here for just a moment. And we might as well kill some sheep along the way. Well, I was hoping for more thin beast bones. There's some jerboas you could hunt. If you ever hear random screaming, you heard it in the last video. The individuals that are unfortunately strung up on those crucifixes at night, they like to scream. And it's extremely, extremely unsettling. I do have another owl up here though. I should go grab that slumbering egg just to show that off. We did get that one owl and slumbering egg just over the pond with the land squirts, but let's go ahead and grab that slumbering egg. And there's a little twinkling off in the distance. Let's put our telescope over here on the pouch on one of the slots that is not tied to the directional pad. And to use it, we just use our interact button. And this functions a lot like the reticle that you get if you're aiming with a bow or a crossbow, which we'll show off once we get one of those. But you can also, not too many people realize this, you can zoom in to a degree using the directional pad. Up on the D-pad, zooms in, down on the D-pad, we'll zoom out. So that right there, we're not gonna go after it right now, but think of this as somewhat an equivalent to the crystal lizards in previous Souls games. It's not a one-to-one correlation, but depending on the color and the material that they're rolling around, and these are scarabs, these are dung beetles essentially. They're called teardrop scarabs here in Elden Ring, but they're dung beetles, let's face it. Some of them can drop upgrade materials, some can drop ashes of war, some can actually just refill your health or your FP flask, your crimson and cerulean flasks, and we're gonna kind of hunt those down to show off what they all do. This one just refills your crimson flask, but I'll show that off. Now to get out of the telescope, if I hit my back button or my roll button, I'll just do a jump back, taking me out of the telescope, or I can just go back over and use it again to put it away. And I think I'll leave those birds alone for now. And as always, I'm going to be looking for more glowing skulls, but here we have a soldier all by his lonesome. I'm going to get his attention and I'm going to show a guard counter with the longsword. So again, shield up. If he attacks with the torch, I'll take a little bit of damage because it's a fire damage, but let's get him to attack me. Immediately follow it up with a guard counter and the critical. 64 runes from him. Let's go to this next one. I'm gonna get his attention, hopefully with the bone dart, so he doesn't get too close to one of the other ones that is up ahead. There we have it. So once again, I'm gonna this time switch to my halberd. Block, he recoils off. There is the stance broken. There's the stance broken. 77 runes. So again, that is that overkill bonus. I dealt enough damage in the killing blow to actually get an additional set of runes. 64 for the regular kill, 77 for the overkill. But now, let's change it up. Let's grab a little bit of raw fruit. I'm actually going to go this way. There's the land squirt pond, just to give you perspective. A little bit more here. So we have an enemy setting at a fire here, another one just up ahead here, but I also want to make sure we get close enough to the trees to get this material on the ground here, which is root resin. There's a few of these right in this area. They do respawn when you rest. Collect them anytime you see them. Root resin is how you craft your weapon buffs. They're called greases in Elden Ring. Your fire grease, your soporific grease, poison grease, etc. We can't craft any now, but it's going to be nice to have a selection of these once we do get the cookbooks in just a little bit. Another one here. We actually got two for that one. Now I could sneak up and get the backstab on him. However, let's go ahead and just show when you block with your weapon, I am going to take some damage because it's not 100% damage negation. There is the stance broken. There's the kill. I should probably get another overkill bonus on that one. I did indeed. Let's go back to the longsword and similarly, let's block with it. Let's let him get a hit off. There is his stance broken. Oh, and we have a boar coming after us. No drops from any of these Godric soldiers, which really is a bit of a shame because they can drop their armor set, which is the Godric soldier set, including the Tree and Beast surcoat, which I love. Their longsword, which is very good. It's the Lord Sorn's straight sword. It is a straight sword, meaning I can power stance it, so I would love to show it off, but it also has a critical modifier of 110, so a little bit higher than the base of the 100 from the regular longsword. So now I'm going to grab some more root resin, or excuse me, rawa fruit here. The other root resin is around, I believe, this tree right here. Yep, there it is. Good, good. So sometimes you do get more than one drop. I think it's completely random from what I can tell. And this time, let's just, once again, put up our shield, recoil, get the break. There we have, oh, we got a drop here. And what did we get? We got some bolts. So bolts, Lordshorn bolts, they can also drop smithing stones, but they can also drop a brass shield. If they are wielding a shield, they can drop a brass shield, which is really good, albeit a little bit heavy. And then just over there, you can hear that twinkling sound. That is where that teardrop scarab is, just behind this set of ruins. We'll go there here in a moment. But let's go ahead and I'm going to two-hand again just to show off the guard break. So you can see there what happened after I kill him. What happened is that because I'm guarding with my sword, I don't have that sort of bounceability, if you will, from the shield itself, meaning he can still combo right through it despite the fact that I am guarding. So if you want to go for a guard counter build using weapons, look for something that can block really well. It doesn't tell you exactly what their blockability is other than the damage negation and the guard boost, but you'll get a feel for it pretty quickly. Got some more bolts, and here are the kukris. We get 4 of them. This is that throwing item that I was talking about just a moment ago. If we compare it to the bone darts, you have B scaling in strength and A in dex. This is A in strength and an S in dex. This will deal immediately much more damage than our bone darts, but it also, as you can see, builds up blood loss. Blood loss is a mechanic we'll talk about in a little bit once we get a weapon that has dedicated blood loss on it, but notice it also has a C in arcane scaling. I'll just go ahead and go down to that so we can take a look. This does not affect the physical damage, so it can be a little bit misleading, and you just have to understand some of the nuances to the item description pages. The arcane will influence how quickly the blood loss is built up in your enemy. So the kukri has a set amount that it will deal in blood loss buildup when you hit an enemy. As you increase your arcane stat, that amount will increase. But a really, really good throwable. We're not going to use it right now. However, we may end up using it in the cave up here. But I've mentioned these ruins. Let's grab some more ruin fragments. So anytime you see these ruins here, if you see shiny, typically it's going to be a ruin fragment. There we have it. And what I'm going to do is, I have a little bit of health loss. I'm going to use my flask of Crimson Tears. And actually, that's a nice little quality of life thing that I should show off. On your hotbar, we have our Crimson Tear flask, we have bone darts, we have rune fragments. Let's say I put on my kukris and I even put on the golden runes. When you want to quickly go to the first item, let's say I'm on my rune fragments, if you hold down on the D-pad, it will switch to that first one. So really handy to get somewhere in a pinch. Let's go ahead and take those back off. I still need to show off the rune fragments versus bone dart. But I have 2 flasks of Crimson Tears. Let's look for that Teardrop Scarab. There it is, and I'm just gonna jump and hopefully land with an R2. There we go. It's gonna try to run away, but as long as we continue to deal damage, he won't escape. And you can see our flask has been restored. So be on the lookout for Teardrop Scarabs, even if it's not something that's going to drop, say, a smithing material. Not a bad idea to grab it just in case, especially if you're low on flasks. Right, so we're actually going to do the cave up here. Instead of continuing on to the next site of grace, we are going to do the cave, the Groveside Cave. The Groveside Cave, not too terribly difficult, just looking for glowing skulls here, but there are a few wolves. Now we bought a torch, and the torch would help us potentially see in this dark cave, The problem is, the torch doesn't allow you to block. Let me go ahead and throw it on here as we get to the site of grace. And might as well rest up. That'll respawn those enemies that we can go and kill again. So with the torch out, I love the lighting, but with my L1, I'm holding it aloft, and this is not going to give us the ability to block, unfortunately. Up ahead though, it's fairly well lit, so you probably don't need it for this cave in particular, and I do want to use the shield for its guard break against these wolves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit closer just so it's nice and fairly bright. And then I'm going to put that away in lieu of my heater shield. Unfortunately, if we had Dukist Herba, which we won't get for some time, glowstone would work really well. But we can actually pick some up here inside this cave, but we need to get some wolves first. So I'm going to show off. Actually, let's try the ruin fragment. So you see we have a couple of smaller wolves, and then the one laying down right by the fire, that is the alpha. That is the strongest one in the bunch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can't pull this smaller one, this lesser wolf right now, and see the ruin fragment, how it just falls. That is unfortunate. And it doesn't look like they're too interested in coming to see me. So let's switch to the bone dart. Oh, actually, we might have one contender, possibly. You can see there are a few. We don't want to get caught fighting all of them. So let's switch to the halberd here. Let them attack. Oh. Let's try that again. Can't help their behavior. There we go. Good clean kill. One at a time if you can. It's nice when they recoil because they can do a 2x combo and do that pretty rapidly, which is unfortunate. And I would hope that the lesser attacks first. Perfect. There we have it. And now it's just the alpha. Well, there's a couple more wolves later on. And I like to use the halberd because especially the alpha likes to jump back after an attack. And you can see there he didn't recoil off of that first attack. So let's try one more. There it is. Got him. Perfect. So we got the kill because we waited for him to recoil off of that second attack. Over here, inside these caves, often you're going to find cave moss. Cave moss is used to craft staunching and neutralizing boluses, which is good for alleviating blood and poison buildup. Some more over there. Let's grab that cave moss, and then instead of hopping down, we're going to take this path off to the right here. We got one more wolf. Switch to the longsword, why not? Come on now. There we have. Nice clean kill. But we do have two more. So let's clear this cave before we do any looting. So one wolf there, one wolf here. I'm going to do a jump R2 on him, and then I will do a charge off or charge forth on the other one if I can manage it. Yes, I can. Perfect. That worked out nicely. And now let's go ahead and pillage some glowstones. Talked about those just ever so briefly in the crafting menu, but now, since we have one to show off, let me go ahead and demonstrate just how useful these can be in dark areas if you don't want to have a torch out. It is a significant amount of light. Now, I used one of three that I have right now, which isn't too great because I can't craft any for quite some time. I just wanted to show it for demonstration purposes. A little bit more cave moss, but back here, this is where the real prize is. Another cracked pot. So that plus the 3 we bought from Calais, that is 4 total. And if you started with them as a keepsake, you're now up to 7, which is very, very impressive. Over here, a bunch of silver fireflies. Grab them when you can. Even though we can't do anything with them just yet, silver fireflies will allow us to craft silver pickled foulfoots, which increase rune acquisition, and we'll get that cookbook a little bit later on. Over here, a whopping golden rune level 1, which is only 200 runes, and that's all the enemies and all the loot up until the boss. So let's run down towards that boss. And we've got some more cave moss. And in here, it's pretty well lit, so I don't need to use the torch. You can use guard counters against this boss, and it does work. The problem is he's using a rather large weapon, and he can do some charge attacks that will almost drain your stamina with a single hit. So do so at your own discretion. but I am going to show you one of my favorite moves that is really easy to punish, especially for a backstab. Otherwise, you can do jump R2s, you can use the charge 4th skill to keep him knocked down, you can use square off with an R2, and eventually you'll break his stance. But this is the Beastman of Farum, Azula. We don't know that name just yet, but we will come to. So he slides at you and he'll often do that follow-up. If you're gonna do guard counters against him, I would try and choose some of the lighter attacks. For example, that is not a light attack, but that follow-up is not too bad. Use your halberd if you're gonna do guard counters, just because it's going to give you the range with the counter. And this right here, that's when you can do that backstab really easily. The backstab after the jump is very easy to pull off in my opinion. Now we could use kukris in order to try and bleed him, but let's try and do a guard counter. Let's see if we can bait his big attack. So that's 1, 2, big overhead with a follow-up. There it is, guard counter, excellent. Okay, doesn't have a lot of poise, so you can knock him out of a lot of his moves. All right, he's gonna do the big combo again. There we go, guard counter. Oh, he lunged at me. That was silly. I was actually trying to two-hand my weapon and then jump and try and knock him down. Let's see, 1, 2, overhead. Follow up. Guard counter. And let's do jump R2. And after this, I'll... I was gonna do another one. I keep forgetting that when he does that move, he actually has a surprisingly big distance closer. All right, let's do another jump R2. All right, let's just do the overhead, fine, and follow up, guard counter. I was really hoping that he would get knocked down. All right, I will never not dodge that apparently. Well, we're not even gonna get the counter, and that is A-okay. Tell you what, just for fun, let's finish him with a nice charge 4th. And there it is. Not a difficult fight. I was trying to show it off and show some different moves. For the kill, you get 1,000 runes and the Flame Drake Talisman. The Flame Drake Talisman, it's our first one unless you started with the Crimson Amber Medallion or Shabriri's Woe. But it goes into this slot, which we only have one slot for now. That will be improved later on. But the Flame Drake Talisman boosts fire damage negation. You can see there on the right-hand side, show the explanation. Defense power and damage negation against fire attacks. Former is calculated via attributes, while the latter is calculated via defensive gear and any additional effects. Okay, so in other words, that left-hand column, that is purely based on our stats. The right-hand column is going to be the percentage decrease based on gear and any additional effects. Roughly, it's a 13% increase with the level 1 talisman, but it does fluctuate. I wouldn't say it fluctuates. There's a law of diminishing returns. The more you stack against fire, the less effective each individual item is. So 13% kind of on average. The problem is the talisman does have weight. So notice here, if I were to put this on, my equip load is 35.4 out of 49.8, which is actually heavy load. So I'm not even going to put that on. But frankly, the only damage that I'm going to take from fire right now would be from the enemies with torches, so I'm not too terribly concerned about it. Right, so that's our first cave done. I healed up, even though I really don't have to. There is no more loot to be had in this arena. You do have this little glowing light here, which will return you to the entrance. They added this, which I guess is a nice feature, but frankly, it's unnecessary, because now that we've killed the boss, we have fast travel. So we have fast travel provided the boss is dead in a given cave, mine, or catacomb. So I could just warp out of here, which is what we're going to do anyway. But I also wanted to show off this little pillar right here. Very innocuous looking stone pillar. This indicates that we can summon our spirit summons. We don't have any right now. We don't have the ability to summon even if we started with the Fanged Imp Ashes, but this pillar means we can use spirits in this area. Every time you can use your spirits, that obelisk will be present in the area. But just like the Stake of America, even if you haven't seen it, there will be a symbol up under your stamina bar that indicates it. We'll see it a little bit later on when we get to the Gatefront Ruins. The reason the symbol's gone is because the boss is gone. I can no longer summon my spirits here because the boss is dead. Alright, well, Beastman of Farum, Azula. Remember that name. It's going to be quite some time before we talk about it again. but Farum Azula will come up time and time again. Let's go back to the Groveside Cave. And now we're going to go kill the Godric soldiers again, both for practice and hope for drops, and then we're going to make our way to the next site of grace at Gatefront Ruin. So now let's go ahead and do a little bit of backstabbing. 291 getting that bonus because he was unaware. Oh, get the root resin because we did rest, so they have respawned. Could also go get the turtle meat again, but I just always feel so terrible about that. Tell you what, let's try a parry on this enemy. See if we can get one off. There we go. I'm a lot better at parrying the soldiers, it seems, than I am the wandering nobles in the Stranded Graveyard. Look at that hitbox. That was beautiful. I actually ducked under his attack using my square off skill and got the kill. Oh, gold tinged excrement for those fetid pots. Get the deer for some more bones, and might as well get a sneak attack here. Getting really terrible luck with the drops. A couple of just R2s there, and what do we get? Lord Sworn's bolt, so just like the regular bolts, except I believe it's an extra 15 damage per bolt, so cool to farm if you're going to be using crossbows this early on, but frankly the regular bolt will probably do you just fine. And how about a guard counter to finish it all off? There we have it. And no drop from him. So let's take a look down this hill. There's a Stake of America. We recognize that. We also have the symbol up in the top left. This is Gatefront Ruins. Gatefront Ruins is the first of many ruins we're going to be encountering here in Elden Ring. And one thing to note is every ruin, if it is officially called a ruin on our map, we can't see it just yet, has a basement. And I say that because you may run around frantically looking and then eventually decide, oh, obviously there is no basement here. There's always a small subterranean section with loot in it in every ruin. But instead of taking this head on, even though there is a developer message right there, instead let's hug the left side rock wall, possibly snag some more deer along the way. There we have it. Great. Giving the ruins a nice wide berth, staying away. Any materials we will snag, and then we're going to rest at the site of grace, and we are going to get our next cutscene. This is an important cutscene. And we're finally going to meet, face to face, the mysterious stranger after we fell after the grafted scion.
Greetings, traveler from beyond the fog. I am Melina. I offer you an accord. Have you heard of the Finger Maidens? They serve the two fingers, offering guidance and aid to the tarnished. But you, I am afraid, are maidenless. I can play the role of maiden, turning runes into strength to aid you in your search for the Elden Ring. You need only take me with you to the foot of the Erdtree.
Melina is offering us an accord. In other words, she's going to assist us in making it all the way to the Erdtree, provided we take her along with us, even though she's just going to follow. You can accept or refuse. If you refuse, that's okay. In fact, I'm going to do that just to show it off.
I understand. I'm asking you to put faith in but a stranger. Yet I'm certain that we can reach an understanding. Summon me by grace, if you should reconsider.
She mentions that if we change our mind, we can call her back, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I leave the site of grace, I go back and rest, even at the very same one, and I now have the option to talk to Melina again.
Have you reconsidered my offer?
And this time, we can accept. At no point does she completely abandon you for refusing her accord. There may be time that she abandons you for other reasons, but that's something we'll talk about much later on. So for now, let's accept her offer.
Then it's settled. Summon me by grace to turn runes into strength. Ah, another matter. I bequeath to you this ring.
She gives us the spectral Steed whistle. If you remember when we first saw her in that opening cutscene after the Grafted Scion area, she was riding a mount.
Use it to traverse great distances. It will summon a spectral steed named Torrent. Torrent has chosen you. Treat him with respect.
At this point, we can now level up. This is the next time that something is added to the list of options anytime we rest at a site of grace. So she has stated that while she cannot be our maiden, she can act as one, and she can channel runes into strength and therefore allow us to level up. We're going to talk to Melina quite a bit during this journey. We'll learn a lot about her, her ambitions, and what her plans are, both for herself and for us. But for now, let's actually level up for the first time.
Runes to strength. Let my hand rest upon you. For but a moment, share them with me. Your thoughts, your ambitions, the principles you would follow.
Fortunately for us, we don't actually have to summon Melina every time we want to level. We can do so at any site of grace, whether or not she is summoned or not. Typically, she's only going to be summoned when we see the option to talk to Melina in the option and then select it. There's a few other times she'll show up kind of unannounced, but not for a bit here. So you can see here that we can increase any of our stats. Up in the top shows us our current level, how many runes we have, and how many runes we need in order to level up. So we only need 811 to level. So if we actually just use our vigor as an example, I can go up 2 levels and I'll still have 663 remaining. In fact, that would only be an extra 200 I would need in order to level up a third time. So instead of leveling up right now, let's actually back up. She will disappear, but that's a-okay. I'm going to use just a single golden rune level 1. So with those extra 200, I'm going to rest again, level up, and now I have enough for 3. This is why it's really good to keep some of those consumable runes on hand, especially if you're so close to getting your next level or to making a purchase. I'm actually going to do something that's not going to benefit us right away, but in the not too distant future, it will. I'm going to bring my intelligence up to 12. There's an NPC that we'll see in a little bit, which again reminds me, I still haven't read the notes we bought from Kale. I'll do that right after this. Remind me, please do. But that NPC is going to have some things for us if we have certain intelligence, and of course if we have enough runes, but we'll make sure we have enough by then. So yeah, intelligence up to 12. Oh, and look at this. We actually have the leaves of the Erdtree falling. I'm so glad we got this blessing. This blessing, you can see there's a symbol up by our stamina as well. It is a foul foot with the arrow pointing up. We are getting more runes provided this blessing is on us. It's about 70% extra runes per kill. This is really just part of the weather system in Elden Ring. It'll happen randomly, just like clear skies will happen, just like rain will happen. But anytime you see this, if you have a good rune farming spot, now's the time to go and use it. And it'll also stack with any other rune increasing buffs like the silver pickled foulfoot you may have. Right, we are still not going to be tackling Gatefront ruins just yet. Instead, we're going to be fast traveling back to the Church of Ella. Wait, I said I was going to read some notes, and that's what we're going to do. Anytime you purchase notes in your inventory, we're going to use our R1 to go all the way over, keep going, all the way to the info, and we have these 2 notes up at the top. By the way, if you ever want to revisit a tutorial, you can do so here in the info. You can learn about the Cave of Knowledge, Sites of Grace, Guidance, the map, wielding armaments, stance breaking, dodging, etc. All of those are here right there, and you can take a look at them at your leisure. But for now, we're just going to take a look at these 2 notes. One is the Flask of Wondrous Physics. A flask of wondrous physic still remains in the 3rd Church of America north of the Mistwood. Cross the highway bridge and follow the animal trail north. Well, we don't know where the Mistwood is. We don't even have a map for this area, but we'll have to stick that in the back of our minds for later. And then we have the Waypoint Ruins, which simply says someone lurks among the Waypoint Ruins on the roads through Limgrave. Once again, we don't know where those ruins are, but we know it's in Limgrave, and once we get the map, maybe we can suss out where that is. Now, I said we were going to fast travel, but at the same time, you know what? We also have a new toy, and that is Torrent, our steed. I'm going to put that on the down directional pad of the pouch. The Spectral Steed Whistle. A delicate gold work ring can be used as a finger whistle. Upon his death, the Spectral Steed can be summoned again, but doing so drains the flask of Crimson Tears. Your mount can die in combat. Every time you get hit while you're on Torrent, there's a chance that he's going to take damage depending on where the enemy hits. If his health runs out, he will disappear, and then in order to recall him, it will use a Flask of Crimson Tears. It'll take one of the charges to resummon him. So keep that in mind, especially if you're in a boss fight. You are taking away 1 heal from yourself to bring him back, but then again, it may be worth it. So let's go ahead and call out Torrent. Here is our wonderful, wonderful mount. On the mount, there are a number of things you can do. There are some things that you can't do. We can still attack, so as I walk along, I can do a light attack, I can do a heavy attack. You can even charge your heavy attack, which keeps your weapon down, and every time you hit an enemy with it down, you can even see there it just creates sparks along the road there. It will deal continuous damage and then a really big damage hit right at the end. But if you use the other side of your controller, the left bumper and the left trigger, you attack on the left side. And you can just alternate left and right, left and right. So really important to know that that's an option, because if there's an enemy over here on my left and I'm circling around him, trying to hit him with my right attacks, I'm probably going to miss quite a lot. And the same thing, we can do a heavy drag attack on the left. You can jump, you can even double jump. And there's a few other things that we can do with Torrent, but we'll get there when we get there. And of course, you can also sprint, and you go very, very quickly with him. With Torrent, you can also loot. So if there's root resin or if there's golden skulls, you can run right over it and you can just mash that collect button and pick it up. To dismount, you click on the left analog stick, but more importantly than just dismounting, if you sprint and then you do the dismount and then attack in the air, you can do this really great kind of plunge attack. So let's resummon once again. And you can do a light attack as well, but the plunge attack deals a lot of stance damage. Okay, I've spoken far too much. Let's warp back to the Church of Ella.
This way, Tarnished. May I have a word?
This NPC is only going to appear once you have obtained the Spectral Steed from Melina. But also, if you advance too far into the game, she won't appear, but what she's about to give us can still be picked up at the Round Table Hold once we eventually get access to it. But before we even talk to her, I do want to give you a nice good look at who this is and what she looks like. Really, really cool character design, beautiful, beautiful clothing. You have this offset spectral face off to her right. The one eye that they share is either closed or completely occluded. You also have 2 sets of arms. Absolutely great character design. And let's talk to Renna.
A pleasure to meet thee, Tarnished. I am the witch Renna. I'd heard tell of a Tarnished hurtling about atop a spectral steed, and upon looking into the matter, the talk, I surmise, is of thee. Thou art possessed of the power, no? To call forth a spectral steed named Torrent.
She's asking if we can call the spectral steed. I'm not going to say that we can't, because from my testing, if you tell her that, she's going to disappear, and then we have to wait to get the item she's about to give us at the round table hold. But no, I can call the spectral steed.
Ah, as I had hoped. I was entrusted this for thee, by Torrent's former master.
We get the spirit calling bell and the lone wolf ashes.
'Tis a bell for calling forth spirits. Summon them with it. From ash and return to the Erdtree, the spirits will obey thine command but briefly, as they recall battles past. Now it is thine, to do with as thou wishest.
Talking to her again is going to make her disappear, so before we do that, let's take a look at these 2 items that we just picked up. So over in the key items, that's where you'll find, well, your cookbooks among other things, but the spirit calling bell. They can only be summoned in the vicinity of a rebirth monument. That little stone pillar I showed you in the Beastman of Farum Azula boss arena, that is that rebirth monument. When summoning is possible, the monument icon will be visible on the left side of the screen. Only one type of spirit may be summoned at once, and none may be summoned during multiplayer. Not only can only one type of spirit be summoned at once, but once you've summoned a spirit, if they die, or if you call them away or send them away by using the spirit calling bell again, you cannot resummon them in that area until you've either died or you've rested. Pretty much you need to reset that area, that encounter, in order to resummon the same ash or a different one. I made the mistake in my blind playthrough of sending one spirit away, hoping I could resummon another one, but that does not work. Just keep that in mind. And then we did get the Ashes of the Lone Wolves. It's going to summon 3 lone wolf spirits. 3 lone wolf spirits. This is somewhat a callback to The Hangover. I'm almost sure of it, but this is a really good early game summon. It does take 55 FP to cost. You can see that up there in the center, but you'll have 3 wolves that will work together to essentially stun lock enemies. They don't deal a ton of damage by themselves, but they can distract enemies and they can keep them occupied while you either clean up all the enemies around, or you can maybe get in and get a sneaky backstab. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to put them on the hotbar, I am going to put them on the left side of my pouch. And we'll be showing that off at the Gatefront Ruins.
Forgive mine intrusion, Tarnished. I doubt we shall again meet. But all the same, learn well the lands between. How long will it be, I wonder, before the Tarnished tire of obeisance to the 2 fingers?
Now we have our first mention of the 2 fingers. We're going to hear a lot more about them. Some NPCs are going to be all about the 2 fingers. Some of them are not going to enjoy the 2 fingers. Some of them are going to talk about the mysterious 3 fingers. But I digress. Let's make our way back to the Gatefront Ruins, but not before talking again to our good friend Kale, and then another conversation with Melina.
Wait, weren't you... Well, you're back. Care to buy something?
And let's actually talk to get to know Kale a little better.
There are others of my people who yet survive in these lands. If the mood takes you when you meet one, then offer them some trade, won't you? My people, wanderers all have long been spurned by the grace of gold, which is why we cannot settle, but instead are forced into this pitiful, unceasing journey. But thanks to that, things are not so different for us now, though the Elden Ring is shattered. I think this makes us kindred spirits of sorts. Your people, the Tarnished, and mine. Perhaps you don't need to hear this, but see that no harm comes to my kin. We have a saying, we wanderers. Lament not your solitude. Expect no sympathy, no regard, nothing. But if anyone dares harm us, show them no mercy. That is our code, so to speak. Just the way we are. Deeply unforgiving. Goodbye for now.
A couple of things. Number one, when we approach Kale again, he says, wait, weren't you... I want him to finish that question. Weren't we supposed to do what? What were we supposedly doing that he was aware of? But unfortunately, we'll never know. But he also mentioned that if we bring harm to one of the other nomadic merchants, then harm will come to us. And sadly, like I mentioned in the last part, that's simply not true. If I were to kill Kale now, and I'm not going to, absolutely not, none of the other merchants are going to be any the wiser, and they're still going to interact with me as a customer. I kind of wish that wasn't the case, but again, there are no consequences to killing them other than the moral bankruptcy that comes with it. Right, to wrap things up in this part, I know we still didn't get to Gatefront Ruins, but we're probably going to next time, I'm almost sure of it. Let us talk to Melina.
This tiny golden aura is the grace of the Erdtree. This light once shone in the eyes of your tarnished brethren, but now it is all that guides you. Or so I hear. You can see them, can't you? The rays of grace that guide you through your burden. Upon the cliff in Castle Stormvale is a shard bearer, a demigod, who inherited a fragment of the shattered Elden Ring. If the rays of grace signal the castle, then the Elden Ring beckons you. As an ally by pact, I pray that you are fit to face the challenge presented by the ring.
Well, I hope that we are fit as well, but by the end of this guide, I think we will be. But that is going to do it for this episode of Everything Possible in Elden Ring, and I hope you learned something. If you did, let me know in a comment below what you learned, and if I missed something, or if you have a better strategy for taking out the Beastman of Farum Azula, let me know that as well so we can all keep learning. And even if you didn't learn something, if you found this video maybe somewhat entertaining, you could hit that like button, or subscribe if you haven't done so already, but I'm sure you have, I know you all. But I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.